full day. Starting at the White House and ending at the National Shrine, we follow Pope Francis in D.C. New saint, a Spanish missionary to the western U.S. now officially recognized among the communion of saints. Migrant surge hits Austria. Thousands arrive in trains from Hungary as the EU wrestles with the crisis. And 90 good years, baseball legend Yogi Berra leaves a legacy of greatness and yogiisms. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, September 23rd, 2015. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. We are live in Washington with Pope Francis tonight. The Holy Father woke up to a beautiful fall morning here. His first stop, the White House.
As the son of an immigrant family, I'm happy to be a guest in this country.
The Pope and President connect on issues such as immigration and the environment. However, Catholic teaching on marriage and family, rejected by the administration, is at the heart of this papal visit.
I will also travel to Philadelphia for the 8th World Meeting of Families to celebrate and support the institutions of marriage and the family.
Ironically, it was the president who first addressed religious liberty.
We cherish our religious liberty, but around the world at this very moment, children of God, including Christians, are targeted and even killed because of their faith.
Many who object to the Obama administration's health care mandate and the recent Supreme Court redefinition of marriage applaud the Pope's stand on freedom of religion.
All are called to be vigilant, precisely as good citizens, to preserve and defend that freedom.
With their differences handled diplomatically, President Obama acknowledges the Pope's wake-up call to the world.
You shake our conscience from slumber. You call on us to rejoice in good news.
And the vice president was on the same page. On Twitter today, Joe Biden says Pope Francis is offering the world hope and optimism. That sentiment echoed by thousands invited to the South Lawn for today's ceremony. Wyatt Goolsby was there and joins us with their reaction tonight. Wyatt?
Yes, Brian, the White House estimates 15,000 people packed the South Lawn this morning, many up early to see and hear from the Holy Father on American soil. With lots of fanfare, the White House formally welcomed Pope Francis to the U.S. Today's arrival ceremony included a diverse audience, from adults and children to clergy and politicians. Most agree there's something special about Pope Francis, and not just because he pulled up to the White House in a $20,000 Fiat.
He's someone that you can actually just talk to. It seems like if I'm able to talk to him, it's like I can actually approach him.
For me, I'm very happy that he's from America, number one, and number two, that he's been very open.
Carlos Arredondo and his wife Melida are from Boston. 2 years ago, Carlos was photographed rescuing Jeff Bauman, a victim of the Boston Marathon bombing. They feel drawn to the Holy Father.
And just the simple message of us being servants to each other, as he stated in Cuba.
Many in the crowd agree with Pope Francis' positions on issues like climate change, but longtime Vatican analyst John Allen says today's speech reminds us the Pope is not limited to any one political party.
Francis did not come here just to talk about climate change, nor did he come here just to talk about marriage. He came here to talk about human dignity. And in the eyes of the Catholic Church, defending marriage and defending the climate are a package deal.
Today, Francis becomes the third pope in history to visit the White House after John Paul II and Benedict XVI. Brian?
Wyatt Goolsby at the White House. Thank you, Wyatt. Pope Francis delights enthusiastic crowds parading in an open Pope-mobile through the streets of our nation's capital this morning. That procession moving slowly past throngs of people crowding sidewalks between the White House and St. Matthew's Cathedral. At one point, a young girl was brought to Francis to receive a kiss and a blessing. The Pope also paused twice to have babies brought to him, kissing these little ones on their heads. From the pageantry of the White House to the spectacle of the Pope-mobile procession, Pope Francis finally returns to the rituals of the Catholic Church. Mark Irons was at St. Matthew's Cathedral, where the Holy Father met with U.S. bishops for midday prayer.
Brian, St. Matthew's Cathedral is the mother church of the Archdiocese of Washington. The funeral of John F. Kennedy took place here in 1963, and in '79, St. John Paul II said Mass here during one of his papal trips. Today, Pope Francis visited. Cathedral Rector Monsignor Jameson welcomed Pope Francis inside for midday prayer with almost 300 U.S. bishops and at least a dozen cardinals. After prayer, Pope Francis spoke to bishops, saying he was not there to judge or lecture them, but to speak as a brother among brothers. Francis praised the bishops' response to clergy sex abuse scandals, saying they have a generous commitment to bring healing to victims. He challenged bishops to confront the issues of the day, highlighting the victims of abortion, terrorism, and drug trafficking. Pope Francis also encouraged bishops to reach out to immigrants.
What we do here with immigrants, he said there's nobody else other than our churches, our congregations, our parishes that do so much for the immigrants.
The Holy Father left St. Matthew's the same way he arrived, in his Fiat. Today's visit adds to the legacy this house of worship holds. Brian.
Thanks, Mark. The first pope from the Americas elevates to sainthood an 18th century missionary who brought Catholicism to California.
Through the labors of your priest, Saint Junipero Serra.
Junipero Serra is declared a saint outside the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington today. This is the first canonization on U.S. soil. St. Junipero was a Franciscan friar from Spain who introduced Christianity to much of California, establishing 8 missions there. Francis fast-tracked his canonization, eliminating the requirement for proof of a second miracle. Latinos now make up 38% of U.S. Catholics, and many are celebrating his canonization tonight. Jason Calvi attended today's canonization Mass. He joins us live from the campus of Catholic University of America. Jason?
Ryan, it was thrilling here today as the Pope arrived. The bells of the National Shrine were roaring, and 25,000 people were absolutely ecstatic. And I had the chance to meet one young woman who had a special role in today's Mass. Megan Jones read at today's historic canonization.
Brothers and sisters, rejoice in the Lord always. As I say it again, rejoice.
I was a little nervous at first, but it came to my mind saying, I think I got this. I know I got it.
But Megan and her parents almost didn't make it because she lost her ID on the train.
There's lots of security out there, and we're concerned that she's going to miss this big opportunity.
They discovered the loss while in line here, where she met some Franciscans.
We prayed to St. Anthony, who finds lost things.
Billy Okumu met the family on the train. He found the ID, trekked all the way here, and tracked down Megan in a crowd of 30,000.
I thought this was a miracle or something.
Poco a poco, de una manera voluntaria.
Father Ken Lavarone was in charge of St. Junipero's case for sainthood. He says keeping the faith in the midst of a crisis is something we can learn from the new saint.
Sarah's motto was siempre adelante, nunca atrás. Always go forward, don't turn back. So that's a good example for all of us, especially when we get discouraged or fed up with things or tired.
Father Ken says it was in November that he got the call from Rome that he had a very strict deadline. By January 1st, he needed to put together all of the latest research on Sarah, as well as any favors or possible miracles that had been attributed to his intercession. So he had until January to do that, January 1st. And then it was in that month that Pope Francis announced that he would do this canonization that took place today. And that announcement came as quite a surprise to those Franciscans involved in this case. Brian?
Jason, what a remarkable story. Thank you. More than 2,000 men and women studying to become priests and religious were there today. These seminarians and novices are from around the world. They were invited to attend the Mass. One seminarian from Maine said, "It's pretty amazing just getting a chance to be with the Holy Father." Another from New Hampshire said bearing witness to the first canonization on U.S. soil was inspiring. It shows that what can be accomplished during a life devoted to Christ. God wants us all to be saints, he says. It's attainable. As Serra was canonized, a bell tolled at the historic mission where he was buried. Dozens of faithful sat in folding chairs watching on a giant TV screen in the mission courtyard. Back to the National Shrine now. Dr. Matthew Bunson has been with the Pope throughout the day today. You just attended that beautiful canonization. What do you think this means for Catholics in America, especially Hispanic Catholics?
Yeah, well, the Holy Father was very clear in sending two powerful messages to American Catholics. The first is to have courage, like Junipero Serra did, but the other is do something with that courage. Take it out. He said Father Serra had the strength, the courage, and the zeal, the love of God to go out into the world and proclaim the gospel. And he's asking us to do the same thing. He doesn't want us to be enclosed. There's one of those classic Francis lines. He said that we cannot derive any comfort from a false security while people are starving at our door. It was a very memorable turn of phrase, a classic Francis turn of phrase.
Among the four themes that were brought up at the White House this morning, did you notice that Pope Francis actually turned toward President Obama when talking about religious liberty?
Yes, he's quite an adept diplomat, but a gentle one. He used diplomatic language, focused, for example, on the word vigilance when he was referring to religious liberty, religious freedom. It was a pointed message to President Obama, but it was also, I think, a word of encouragement to American Catholics who are very concerned about that very issue.
In talking about his trip to Philadelphia for the World Meeting of Families, he indicated he used the word institutions. Talk about that reference to the institutions of marriage and family and its significance.
Well, it was a nice reminder from Pope Francis as to why exactly he's come to the United States. He is here for the final closing of the World Meeting of Families. I think we're going to be hearing a lot from him over the next couple of days as he has these encounters with families. And then we have this build-up to the UN on Friday, and then, of course, the closing Mass and the vigil on Saturday and the closing Mass in Philadelphia on Sunday, where the family is going to be distinctly in focus. And let's not forget that only a week after that, he opens a synod on the family.
And just an observation, Matthew, when he acted as a world leader, you talked about his diplomacy. When he shifted to the Catholic world, to St. Matthew's Cathedral, to the National Shrine, did he become more pastoral?
Yeah, I think if we need one word for today, and where he was at the White House, where he was at the National Cathedral, and where he was today at the Basilica for the canonization, it's gentle. He was a gentle diplomat, but then with the bishops, he was a gentle pastor. He was a gentle colleague in a way. He was a brother to them, encouraging them, especially in the sex abuse scandal, and then encouraging them to be good shepherds. Here, he was a gentle pastor again, reminding us to have that courage to go out. So I think gentle pastor is the word, and he is probably the most pastoral pontiff we've had, certainly since John the 23rd.
Dr. Matthew Bunson from Catholic Distance University joining us from the National Shrine. Thank you, Matthew. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Fingerprints of more than 5.5 million people who applied for or received federal security clearance have been stolen. At first, that number was thought to be about 1.1 million. The Obama administration says the data was likely hacked in a Chinese espionage operation. That stolen sensitive data could threaten the identities, even the safety of some U.S. spies. Migrants and refugees continue pouring into Austria. 5,000 had crossed the border by 2 p.m. local time today. They were given food and shelter by the Austrian Army and the Red Cross. More special trains carrying migrants and refugees are expected to arrive from Hungary over the next several weeks. The European Union leaders meet in Brussels for an emergency summit on the migration crisis. Interior ministers approved a plan to resettle more than 100,000 refugees and migrants. Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic voted against the plan. EU's vice president says for this to work, all EU countries must cooperate.
Solidarity cannot be sustained without responsibility. There are two sides of the same coin.
Roughly 500,000 people have fled to Europe this year looking for work and safety. It ain't over till it's over. One of his many short quips. It is now over for baseball legend Yogi Berra. He died of natural causes at age 90 yesterday in New Jersey.
It was Yogi Berra who said, "You can observe a lot by just watching."
It ain't over till it's over.
It's deja vu all over again.
Quoted by presidents and other politicians, Yogi Berra may be more famous for his colorful turn of a phrase than his Hall of Fame baseball career as a New York Yankee. Born Lawrence Peter Berra, he was given the nickname by a childhood friend who thought he looked like a snake charmer in a movie. But it was Yogi's outgoing personality that made him a favorite of sports writers and fans.
There's some familiar faces here, but none more beloved than Yogi Berra. Yogi's been an inspiration to me. Not only because of his baseball skills, but of course for the enduring mark he left on the English language. Some in the press corps here even think he might be my speechwriter.
I don't. I really don't know I say them. It just comes out.
His so-called Yogiisms made him one of the most quoted Americans since Mark Twain.
Yogi Berra once said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it.
Not real good at making forecasts, particularly if they involve the future.
Advertisers also took notice of Yogi's appeal.
And they give you cash, which is just as good as money.
Part comedian, part competitor, the three-time MVP was one of the greatest catchers in baseball history. He appeared in an astounding 21 World Series as a player, coach, or manager. In 1998, the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center opened its doors, paying tribute to his career and his lifelong commitment to education.
Whoever thought I would be a kid from the hill from St. Louis have a museum? It's just like me getting voted into the Hall of Fame. I never thought I'd get in the Hall of Fame either, but I made it, you know. Maybe it was pure luck, I don't know.
Luck or not, Yogi Berra wouldn't change a thing.
It was fun. If I had to do it over again, I'd do it again.
Coming up, the most sacred of all Jewish religious holidays, the Day of Atonement, is observed today. On Wednesday, September 23rd, our special EWTN News Nightly coverage of Pope Francis in America continues. More on the Pope's apostolic journey in a moment, but first, Russian President Vladimir Putin opens Moscow's new Cathedral mosque, one of the largest in Europe. It is part of a push to appeal to Russia's 20 million Muslims. There are about 2 million in Moscow, but the city has few places for them to worship. This new cathedral mosque will hold 10,000. Putin praises the Muslim faith and its long tradition in Russia, urging Muslim clerics to speak out against extremism and terror. Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement, began at sunset last night. It ends the 10 days of repentance that begin with Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. Yom Kippur is considered the most important and most sacred of all Jewish religious holidays, with no work permitted today. Pope Francis issued a special greeting to members of the Jewish community, praying they continue with a life of holiness. About 2 million Muslim pilgrims from all over the world gather in Saudi Arabia for a solemn day of prayer. They are marking the pinnacle of the Hajj pilgrimage. Muslims believe the Prophet Muhammad delivered his final sermon from Mount Arafat, calling on people to unite. Islam requires that able-bodied Muslims perform the Hajj at least once in their lives. Well, there is great suffering among Christians who live in the path of the Islamic State reign of terror. A priest who directly shares in their plight visited with us recently. Father Behnam Binaca, an Iraqi priest from Bartella, a Christian town in the Nineveh Plain, is with us. Father, how is your family affected by the ISIS violence?
So it was the 6th of August last year when ISIS attacked Bartella and other towns situated in Nineveh Plain, Christian towns. So like other families, they left their house. They lost everything there. Literally everything.
And you helped to put together a field hospital for refugees, did you not?
I saw the difficult situation of the children and other people because they suffered too much during their displacement from Nineveh Plain or Mosul to Erbil. They walked too much, so there were very high degrees.
They needed a lot of help.
Yeah.
You wrote the Holy Father a letter hand-delivered by our Alan Holdren to Pope Francis aboard the papal plane saying, "I write you with my tears because here we are in a valley of darkness in the middle of a great pack of ferocious wolves. Holiness, I am afraid of losing our little ones, especially the infants, who daily struggle and weaken more. I am afraid that death will kidnap some. Send us your blessing so as to have the strength to go on, and perhaps we can still resist."
Our situation was very, very difficult. Still, I didn't know what can I do as a pope, as a father of all of us. Help us, please, because your children are dying.
You asked for his blessing, did he?
Yeah. Really. He make a call for me after that, days after my letter, and said a blessing. And with that blessing, we are working, up to now.
What a beautiful story. Father Benem Binaca, we appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, a preview of tomorrow's first ever papal address to a joint meeting of Congress, and a fascinating look at notable moments between popes and U.S. presidents. As we continue our special coverage of the Pope in America on EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick, and Pope Francis is the first Pope to address the U.S. Congress. There's a good deal of speculation about what he'll say tomorrow. Vatican expert John Thavis gives us his take.
I think he's going to have some very important things to say about how the Catholic Church shows its mission of mercy in society. And I think to underscore that, he is, in fact, going to places where the Catholic Church helps people in terms of charity, in terms of the homeless, in terms of schools, education, and in terms of prison ministry.
The address to the joint meeting of Congress will be in English. It can be seen live on giant screens at the west side of the Capitol facing the National Mall. Dr. Chad Pecknold, a theology professor at the Catholic University of America, is author of Christianity and Politics. So the Pope is a priest first, but also he is a head of state. How do we see the balance between those two roles?
Yeah, historically, popes have a supreme power, which is both spiritual and temporal. The temporal is meant to protect the Church's freedom, the Church's independence. The Church doesn't depend on any nation or state. The Pope comes here as the head of a city-state, the smallest city-state in the world, and he is received here as that. And this is how we should understand his reception at the White House and other places, is in his role as a political leader.
But for us as Catholics, he is our Holy Father. But in meeting with other political leaders and really diving into some fairly controversial political topics, does not that invite political commentary?
I think it does, and I don't think the Holy Father is afraid of that. The Holy Father has articulated principles, he's articulated the teachings of the Church, and those principles are going to come up against different ways of implementing them, different policies. You can have policy disagreements in the public square, which are vigorous in relationship to the principles that the Holy Father has articulated.
He speaks to a very divided Congress tomorrow. Do you think he can bridge that aisle or that canyon, so to speak?
I don't think he's going to make Congress work overnight. No. But I think it is remarkable that the Pope's presence in Congress is itself an extraordinary, quite conservative presence, because when a Pope comes into Congress, first time in history, it says that there's something above politics. There's something which transcends politics, and he'll speak to issues which are prior to politics. Questions of the common good, questions about our families, questions about the dignity of humans on the ground, our neighbors, how to love our neighbors as ourselves. Those are pre-political questions, and that limits politics when you're talking about those, what's below and what's above.
History being made. Dr. Chad Pecknold, thanks.
Thank you so much.
And finally tonight, we flash back to notable moments in the nearly 100-year history of meetings between popes and American presidents. President Woodrow Wilson and Pope Benedict XV met at the Vatican in 1919. John F. Kennedy, the first Catholic president of the United States, met Paul VI only days after his coronation in 1963. Jimmy Carter hosted the first White House papal visit in 1979, and George W. Bush presented St. John Paul II the Medal of Freedom in 2004. President Bush also hosted Benedict XVI at the White House on the Pope's 81st birthday. For the EWTN News Nightly team, thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. Be sure to join us tomorrow after EWTN's live coverage of the Pope at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. We leave you tonight with these moments from this special day in American and church history. Good night and God bless you.